So let's get into the actual steps. Acknowledgement. And again, I've underlined the word knowledge, highlighting that this is similar to the first step of the trivium process. Okay? Acknowledgement is the first step of the AAA shadow work methodology. The word knowledge is literally contained inside the word acknowledgement. And again, it can be spelled with or without the E. I chose to keep the E in it for consistency and for obvious reference to the word knowledge. The step of acknowledgement could also be referred to by its synonym, admission. So if you make an acknowledgement, you are also making an admission. And an admission means access, a right of entry, letting in. That's admission. You could even call it access, right? That's what the word admission means. Acknowledgement is the entry point. Okay? The step of acknowledgement or admission is the access or entry point to self-knowledge. Without that first step, forget it. You're not delving into the psychology of the self. You're skirting around the issue. So you have to admit to yourself where your shortcomings are in step number 1. In this step, we must fully admit, admission, access, entry point. Admit the truth of our current state of being without reservations or excuses. You make no excuses in this step. You are failing at this step if you attempt to make excuses. So you fully admit the truth of your current state of being, your current state of consciousness, without reservations or excuses, so that we can make an accurate diagnosis regarding the course of action that must be taken to change that condition for the better. If you're not honest, if you lie to yourself in the first stage, you can't make the correct diagnosis in the second stage, and then you're not going to be able to take right action in the third. So if any part of the process goes awry, you're going to fail. You have to do it in the correct order, with the correct intentions, and full, absolutely blatant honesty. Brutal honesty. Okay? So this is step 1. And here's the quote on this page. Today I acknowledge my wrongs because I understand that in order to not repeat them, I must take full responsibility for them. Today I acknowledge my wrongs. This is the acknowledgement step of the shadow work process, the AAA shadow work process. Today I acknowledge my wrongs because I understand that in order to not repeat my wrongs, I must take full responsibility for them. Full, honest responsibility for your shortcomings and inadequacies. Acknowledgement is almost certainly the most difficult stage of the shadow work process. Almost certainly. Now, that's not to say that the others aren't. Right? Fully understanding what must be done, making a diagnosis, actually doing the actions, very difficult. But most people never even get to steps 2 or 3 because they never undertake step 1, acknowledging their wrongness, their shortcomings, their inadequacies. They don't even want to look at those things in themselves, let alone fully acknowledge them and fully be honest about them. So, this stage is the most difficult because it involves brutal honesty with oneself. This stage of shadow work can only be accomplished by fully telling the unfiltered truth about ourselves and our own behavior. This is done by looking at your own reflection in the mirror that we talked about and speaking aloud, not in your mind, aloud in the room so that your voice reaches your ears. You are saying this right into your own ears and you're into your own mind. You're not silent during shadow work. You say it aloud. That's the best practice. Okay? You look at your own reflection and you speak aloud true statements about your current state of being, and you ask hard questions about your current state of being. All true statements of acknowledgement begin with the phrase, "It is true that I, dot, dot, dot. Whatever comes after that, we can look at many examples of, and we will. But all statements of acknowledgement, okay, start with the phrase, it is true that I, and then you make a statement about yourself, about your inadequacies, fears, wrongdoings, transgressions against others, shortcomings, etc. Okay, so let's look at this and flesh this process out further. There are 0 excuses allowed during the step of acknowledgement. You do not try to present because I did this because, well, it happened because this or that. No excuses. You present it without reservation or excuses. You're not here to explain all of the technicalities of why something occurred. Okay? That's not part of this step. If you get bogged down in talking about the because, the why, the excuses, you don't get it. You're not grokking this stage of the process. Okay? And again, people hate hearing this because they're like, oh, well, there's reasons. We're not here to talk about the reasons. We're here to talk about the manifestation of what occurred. That's it. Nothing else. Period. The facts, the knowledge. Nothing else. It is critically important to not attempt to make any excuses whatsoever during this stage of shadow work. Do not offer any reasons, qualifications, or caveats. Do not lay blame upon others during this stage. Even if things were influenced by others in certain ways, you don't lay blame on it. You're not here in this stage to... I didn't sit there in the acknowledgement of when I was coming out of Satanism saying, oh, these people wrote these books with all these lies in it, and I read it, and it's because of them. All I said was, I was deceived. I allowed that deception to happen. My spiritual weakness allowed it. That's it. The end. My responsibility as an adult. That's it. No excuses. Just tell the truth about the ways that you have fallen short of being a better version of yourself. Don't say, I did this because, ... Don't do that. Drop that. Get that out of your mind. Eliminate that from your vocabulary. Making excuses or trying to explain reasons why you previously chose poor behavior will only lessen the power and effectiveness of your acknowledgement in the moment that you are doing this shadow work process. You want maximum power. You want maximum effectiveness. Just say what is the truth. Just say what happened. Just say how you fell short. That's it. Just say what your transgression was. It is true that I don't always have patience with people. That is something that I must work on. That's it. That's it. Don't make excuses. There's a billion excuses. There's a billion reasons, obviously. That's not part of this process. You're entering some other field of endeavor where you want to understand more about why certain people behave certain ways. That's not shadow work. Shadow work is about you and your shortcomings and your inadequacies. That's it. Just tell the truth, brutally honest. Okay? In the acknowledgement stage, you have to present yourself very difficult questions that are going to lead to proper acknowledgements. So you're going to ask yourself, what am I like in this regard? How am I doing in this other field of my internal aspects of my personality? And then you answer the question 100% sincerely and honestly with no excuses. During the acknowledgement step of shadow work, we must ask ourselves some of the most difficult questions we will ever endeavor to truthfully answer in our lives. These questions delve into the core of our essence as a human being, and these questions allow us, if we are being honest with ourselves, to admit our shortcomings and inadequacies so that they may be confronted and improved. We will explore some of these difficult questions and the types of acknowledgments to which they lead us. So you're going to ask questions about yourself, and then you have to just brutally and honestly answer those questions without excuses. So we're going to go into some of the questions. Then we'll go into what comprises good acknowledgement statements during shadow work, during the actual method. Here's one of the first questions I think people should ask themselves in the shadow work method. In the process of actually doing this work, sitting down in front of a mirror, asking yourself difficult questions, and saying what the truth is regarding it. So the questions will lead to the acknowledgement. So we present the question and then we answer the question. So let's look at how one of these works, and then we'll see many more examples. A critical dynamic in shadow work is to reevaluate our worldview, as we already talked about, and to discover the extent that our worldview may have been poisoned by others in our lives who we naively trusted in our past. So the people that we may have naively trusted could be our parents, our family members, our friends, our teachers, clergy, work peers, the media, and many others who we formerly viewed as trusted and reliable sources of information and advice. And we had a whole slide where we talked about that in part 1. So once we ask ourselves this question, has my worldview been poisoned by those who I previously naively trusted? And you're going to answer it honestly. Yes, it is true. So here's a good example of an effective acknowledgement regarding this particular dynamic during shadow work. You look in the mirror. Have I allowed my worldview to be poisoned and turned dark, negative, and false by those who I have previously and sadly, naively trusted in my past? Yes, it is true that I have allowed my parents, via their religious beliefs, to poison my worldview regarding human nature and human potential. It is true that I listened to the media and I bought all the hype and the absolutely unfounded fears, and then acted as a tyrant against other people during COVID when I didn't understand those factors at all truly. And I just acted out of ignorance. That's it. Total acknowledgement. And it doesn't matter what dynamic this entails. You're going to present the question about the dynamic. You're going to look in the mirror and you're going to answer the question honestly. And again, all good affirmations, all true, good, positive, powerful affirmations start with, it is true that I have done this. That's it. Say it to the universe and to yourself. It is true. I have acted this way and I know better. I should know better. And I did that anyway. That's it. That's it. No excuses proffered or offered. None. That's one of the hardest things any human being could ever do, because what you're basically saying is, I was wrong. I have failed. I have been inadequate. I have acted improperly. No one wants to sit and say this to themselves, let alone to anybody else. But guess what? You'll continue to lie to yourself, and you'll continue to lie to other people, and you'll continue to do the same shortcomings and inadequacies until you acknowledge this to yourself. That's why acknowledgement is the very first step of all shadow work. So, as on a theme, all throughout today, worldview has to be healed first, ladies and gentlemen. If you do not heal worldview, you are not doing any further healing. Get over it. True and blanket statement, worldview must be healed first. And that means understanding true human nature as programmable. That means understanding that positive change is absolutely possible. That means understanding false ideas have been programmed into us, and it's our responsibility to deprogram from them and then change our programming and turn it for the better so that we can then align ourselves with truth and natural law. Some more questions that will lead to a proper and correct acknowledgement. Have I acted on bad advice from those who I previously naively trusted? Because how many of us have done that? We've gotten bad advice. We think it's coming from a trusted person who is concerned for us and our best interests, and they may even have that. They're just not very intelligent when it comes to what really needs to be done. They haven't made a correct diagnosis. So we have to address that as well, but you still don't make excuses in your acknowledgement. So here's how this process works. Many times, people we care about or trust give us bad or even terrible advice. They also sometimes give us completely incorrect evaluations of ourselves, our abilities, and our potential, telling us, oh, again, like I said, that's not for you. Oh, you're not suited to this. You'll never make that work. You'll never be successful in this. Later realizing that they were completely wrong regarding such things does not mean that you cease to care about them. So just because your parent may have given you horrific life advice and you went down a path that was completely painful and destructive does not mean you have to hate your parent. But you shouldn't put them up on a pedestal and say, oh, they did the best that they can, because they didn't do the best that they could, because they didn't bother trying to be right. They just went with whatever was told to them and then repeated the process by telling it to you. So it's not like you have to vehemently hate them, but you don't put them up on a pedestal and go, my parents could do no wrong. They were some of the greatest people that ever lived. Most people's parents are fucking dumbasses. Let's just face it and say it out how it is, street language wise. Most people's parents are dumb as a sack of horse shit. Okay? That's because most parenting in the world is garbage. Otherwise, the world wouldn't be the garbage that it is. If we had great parents, all of us, we'd be great people, and the world would be a great place. The world is the way that it is because of fucking bad parenting. And if you can't acknowledge that to yourself, you're not really doing shadow work. That doesn't mean you have to hate your mother or father. You could perhaps even pity them that they got terrible life advice and information programmed into them. So, realizing that you got wrong advice and got led down the garden path doesn't mean you cease to care about those people. It does, however, mean that you should not listen to or act upon their bad advice or evaluations. And you have to realize, wow, this is a person giving terrible evals about me and my life and choices and potential, and they're really not qualified to even speak on this. Okay? So sometimes you can listen to advice if it's come from a really good place and a place of knowledge, and sometimes you have to realize this is pure shit. And you need discernment to do that, which comes with life experience and delving into these dynamics of psychology. A good acknowledgement regarding this dynamic is, it is true that I have based my life path upon the terrible advice of my parents, who were awful at evaluating my true potential. I chose unwisely to listen to them, and I have suffered because of my decision to do so. You see how the onus is not placed on the parent. You're just saying what they did, but you're saying it was your responsibility. You listened to bad advice. You took bad advice. They don't have to be a deceiver. They could just be totally fucking wrong. But you're the one who listened to and acted upon the bad advice instead of doing enough research on your own and coming to a correct conclusion. You just didn't want to do that work, and so you wanted to take advice from somebody you think knows better than you, and they know complete shit. And sorry to just burst your bubble and say it that way, but that's just the way that it is. So that's how you do a proper acknowledgement regarding, I took advice from people I thought had their act together and cared about me, and they didn't really know shit. But it's my responsibility because I acted upon that advice. You don't make excuses. You took the advice and acted upon it. Another question you'd have to sincerely pose and then sincerely and honestly answer is, have I remained ignorant regarding matters of true importance in life? How many people have not really focused on the right things in life? Ignorance is the very first in all the occult traditions of the 4 primary destroyers of human consciousness. Remaining in ignorance of matters of true importance in the world, like what's going on with human freedom, like what's going on with the manipulation of people's minds, like what's going on with the degradation of people's true morality, how they're moving away from what true morality is, not religious bullshit morality. But they don't really understand that all authority and government are forms of enslavement and immorality and violence and coercion and usurpation of free will. So if you have remained ignorant of those things, you're propagating ignorance out into the world. So if you remaining in ignorance of matters of true importance regarding human freedom and the overall human condition is what ultimately perpetuates the state of human slavery and injustice which prevails in our world. Here is an example of a proper acknowledgement regarding one's own ignorance. Very simple. Here it is. You ask that question, have I remained ignorant of things that I really should have understood? And you say, yeah, it is true that I have been ignorant regarding true morality. I haven't bothered to make that a part of my life and to study it from an objective perspective. I've just listened to what some absolutely brain dead clergy member told me about what morality is in some cultural religious belief system that I shouldn't have trusted. But I went off and listened to that naively because you know why? It's easier. I don't have to do my own work and my own introspection. It's way easier to just take some other idiot's word for it. That's acknowledgement, folks. That's how it works. You just say what's true regarding what you have done and your failure and your shortcoming. And you do not make any excuses or qualifications. You just say what you've done. That's it. I'm not sitting there going, oh man, the guy who wrote these articles in this magazine that I read just completely swayed my belief system towards Satanism, and it's all his fault, man. No. I bought into false ideology. I became a worse person because of it. I wasn't concerned with matters of real importance in the world. I'm not paying attention to tyranny and enslavement and the destruction of human freedom. That's my shortcoming. Doesn't matter what anybody else did. People loathe this idea. In many cases, they want to murder the person that wants them to acknowledge things like that. That not only don't they want to do it, they would go into a killing frenzy. I'll complete this slide on the other side of the dinner break and then continue. Do I have enough information for a true understanding? Have I gathered the grammar? Or have I not gathered enough grammar that I'm still going to remain confused? We'll continue with this on the other side of the dinner break. Okay, so our break will be 4:30 to 6. So I will begin precisely again at 6 p.m. Hopefully people have cleared up some of the tech issues if possible. Okay, but an hour and a half break. We'll be back here precisely at 6 p.m. for session 3. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll see you at 6.